Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the season 2 of Azure for sure. I'm your host, as always, Simon, and we are back. And for someone who's joining us for the very first time, we do this Azure for sure every Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. We sometimes change it because our speakers join from different part of the world, so I have to be kind, else no one will show up on my show. All right, so I'm really excited for this episode today. This is already episode number 4 in season 2. We have 10 episodes, which means this season will last till the first week of the April, and all the 9 guests are already scheduled. I'm just wondering who's going to be the final guest of this episode. I want to do it in person, not virtual. I'm just looking for someone from India. I can go and put camera on his or her face and ask them to record with me. So everyone, if you have any questions or queries, please feel free to go ahead and drop it in the comments. We'll take them within the show, or maybe towards the end. And joining us today, I'm really excited to host the gentleman from Austria. I'm hosting after almost a year and a half back. He is Hannes Lagler. I'm not going to say his last name because I cannot say it. He is a senior cloud architect with consulting experience of more than 50 years. I was probably in the school then, right? Or maybe in kindergarten. No, I'm not that small. He has a deep experience in IaaS security, networking, governance, and he started his career at one of the biggest Austrian banks, then moved to Microsoft Australia, and now he's working with ACP IT Solution as a lead cloud solution architect. Wow. Let's welcome our guest. Hi, Hannes. Welcome to the Azure for Sure live show.
Hi, Simon. Thanks for having me.
Right. So happy to see you back after so long. So yeah, were you joining us today from, as I said, Australia, right? What time is it at actually?
7 p.m. It's at the moment, yes.
That's nice. That's a good time to join after the work. So I see, Hannes, today you're talking about central network management in Azure, and that is very specific right now. I'll tell you. I know you not only work with the Azure, but you also work with the other cloud services, right? So maybe AWS and Google and on all that. And I don't see, and I host people from different background, and I really never see people talking about central network management, right? People talk about web apps, we will talk about SQL servers. So let me ask you this: why did you choose to go and talk about network management?
So from my point of view, it's really important to have a centralized network management. So in the past, it was really hard to manage networks in Microsoft Azure, and Microsoft have now announced a new feature like Network Manager. So this is the topic from today, and it's really cool, and it's really important. So from a security standpoint, from the configuration standpoint, and for everything. So network is really important for all services, also as well for us services.
It is, yeah. And if network goes down, your entire application is down, right? So Hannes, is this level 100 or is it level 200? I know you can also take it to level 400.
It's level 200 up to level 300. Yes.
Yeah, I knew you were not coming with any introductory session. I knew that.
So it's a series session and also a live demo. So
wow, that's good.
Present in live. So keep in mind it's really live. So if something happens, it's not my pain.
All right, I'm really excited and looking forward to this. I'm going to add your screen to the stream now. Everybody else can see it, and you're good to go whenever you want.
Okay, thank you. Good. So a short introduction from my side. Additional points here. So I'm a Microsoft MVP as well. So I love to work with the community. You can see it also about my social media sharing. So I have my private YouTube channel. I have my private blog called cloudblogger.at. I also am LinkedIn, Twitter, Xing from the Austrian perspective, and I also have GitHub repositories where I share my content, where I share my scripts, and sometimes also applications. So I have a broad certification level. So from Microsoft Azure is my focus point here. I have the most certification, but I'm also certified in GCP and AWS as well. So let's go ahead and talk about the network management or the centralized network management. The first topic from our agenda is the why. Why should we use a centralized network management? So we have covered a little bit before. The next point is the what and the how. So go ahead and talk about why. Why it's so important to have a centralized network management. So when we think about our Azure environment, for example. So normally you start maybe small. You have a virtual network, and in this virtual network you place your PaaS services. Your PaaS services over private link, or you have VMs in Azure, infrastructure service, and everything is in one virtual network. But the best practice here is to increase your network. So when you think about the enterprise scale framework, you don't have one network, you have more networks, and you have an hub and spoke technology. So like this one here. So we have here now a separate network where we place also our VPN gateway or express route. And this is the connectivity between on-premise and the cloud. So in this case, we have maybe 4 networks. Then we have different network security groups on each subnet or on each virtual network in different regions maybe. Over the time, we also have different VMs, and the VMs should be communicated with together. And then we have another network connecting. And the problem here is the complexity increases. So it's really, really hard to manage this configuration centralized. And the customer challenges here are: you have high complexity, you have no centralization with a traditional environment, you have a huge operational overhead when you want to change something, when you want to add a new functionality or a new region with network components. And the most important thing here is when you add a new region and you have one configuration in place, the errors are mostly, in most use cases, brings high costs with it. And you have to think about building network at scale. So when you increase, your company or your customer increase to use more and more regions. So that are the customer challenges. And the answer here for the centralized network management and also for the operation and overhead could be the Azure Network Manager is maybe the answer for all this question here. So let's go ahead and talk about the what. The Azure Network Manager is a new service. Keep in mind, this is a preview service, so it's not generally available at the moment. You can use it, so this is a public preview. You can use the service, you can provision it in your environment, but I always recommend do not use previous services in your production. But I will show the most functionalities from the service itself in the demos in a few minutes. From the service perspective, it's high scalable, it's high available, so it's a platform as a service. You don't have to think about environments, you don't have to think about scaling up, scaling down, and it's a redundancy and global replicated service. You can do 2 topics here. You can manage your virtual networks, and the second one is also really, really interesting. You can manage network or security admin rules. We will cover this in the second topic, but let's go ahead and talk about the network management from the virtual network perspective. So manage your virtual networks. What can you do? The benefits are here low latency, high bandwidth between resources in different virtual networks using virtual network peering. So this is nothing new. You can use virtual network peering you can use virtual network peering in the traditional way, for sure. But with Virtual Network Manager, you also create the virtual network peering, but you have a really important benefit here. When you think about virtual network peering and you want to add a new virtual network space or address space, you always have to think about synchronization between those virtual networks, and you don't have to do this with Virtual Network Manager. So you don't have to synchronize your VNet peering when you add a new address space. The second point here is, or the second benefit here is the rollout. So when you configure VNet peerings, you say, okay, these are my 2 virtual networks and I want to peer it together. With Virtual Network Manager, you can define rollout sequence when you want to connect, for example, East US to West US, and 1 week later you want to connect West Europe. So you can do this over sequences, not for all environments. So you have the ability to use sequences here. So these are the most common benefits from the high-level perspective. Let's go a little bit deeper and answer the question, the how. How can we do this? So first of all, we have to define the deployment process. The deployment process is really simple. In the first section, you have to define the scope. The scope means you have, for example, your environment, you have a management group, and you have more than one subscription. You can define the scope on the subscription level, management group level, or what you prefer. Then you're creating network groups, creating a configuration, and at the end, you will deploy the configuration. Let's go a little bit deeper from the scope perspective. Once more, you can define the scope based on the subscription, based on the management group level, or based on the tenant level if you want to use cross-tenant scopes. So we will cover this in a few seconds. You can change the scope if you want later. So you start small, think about I want to cover only one subscription with my virtual networks in this subscription. And over the time, you also want to add another subscription, or maybe go a little bit higher to a management group level and add virtual networks from other subscriptions, for example. Then you have to define the network group. A network group is a global container, or it is a container that includes a virtual network, one or more virtual networks from different regions, from different subscriptions, what you prefer. And you can segment those configuration or those network into different environments if you want. So you can define a development environment, production environment, test environment, staging environment, what you ever prefer. You have two assignment options for network groups. You have a static option and you have a dynamic option. And let's go ahead. What is the static option? Static means you add a virtual network, and this is really a manual add, static added to the network group. And with this option, with this network group static option, you also have the ability to use a cross-tenant level scope. So think about, you have maybe two environments. You have your productive environment and you have your staging environment, for example. And you want to connect both environments over different tenants, and you also want to add virtual networks from other tenant. You have the ability to do this with the cross-tenant level connection. So you need separate permissions in the second tenant for your user or for the service principal, and then you have the ability to add virtual networks from those from that Azure Active Directory as well. This is only available at the moment for the network group from the type static. But if you want, and if you want to implement a more dynamic way, you can use the dynamic networking group. This allows you to define policies, or to define policies which virtual network should be added automatically. Keep in mind, in the backend, you're deploying an Azure policy, and it could take up to 50 minutes to see the new virtual network based, for example, from a specified tag or on a specified ID to your network group. To assign dynamic groups or dynamic networking groups, you also need additional permissions, because you're creating a policy, and then you need a separate permission. You have two options here. You can add a built-in rule. You can define built-in rules or assign built-in rules to the user. The network or resource policy contributor have this rule included. Or you can define your own role-based access control, and you can see here the three roles are required to create dynamic networking groups. Okay, and at the end, you have to define your configuration. Your configuration, first of all, you have to define the topology. And keep in mind, a virtual network can be a part of up to 2 connection groups. So when you create more than one connection group and you want to, for example, connect the dev with the test environment as well, you can overlapping. You have the ability to overlap your virtual networks up to 2 connecting group or networking groups. And this is the only limitation here. When we think about the definition from the topology, we have here different options. So from the networking perspective, we have the option to create a hub and spoke network. That is the most common configuration or the most common topology. We can also configure mesh configuration. So this means the connection between virtual network is always directly as a direct connection. Or, and this is from my point of view, the most interesting one, you can also define a hub and spoke with a direct connectivity. So this means the communication in Azure is always direct. So it's not the communication is not over the hub virtual network. The communication inside Azure is always directly. And when you want to communicate with an on-premise service, you always go over the hub virtual network. And in this case, maybe a VPN gateway or Express gateway. So these 3 options, you have exactly these 3 options for them from the topology perspective. And then at the end, when we have the networking group, when we have the topology in place, we are going to deploy. We're going to deployment process. So in this case, you have to define the region where you want to deploy the configuration. So you can select the different region. Keep in mind, always use the regions where you have networking components in place and where you want to connect to your environment. Also keep in mind, but this is now really, there's a huge improvement here that the latency is really fast. You will see it in a few minutes. You will see it in a few seconds in the live demo. So last year, when I present this topic the first time, it could take up to 5 minutes that the deployment process is finished. Now we have a few seconds and you can see the connection is available. One funny part here, so we have here limitation, but from my customer perspective, I don't have customers with more than 15,000 Azure subscriptions, so I don't have the limitation here ever seen before. So but keep in mind, when you have a customer with more than 15,000 Azure subscription, you can only apply virtual network policy to the subscription or resource group scope. So this is the only limitation. This is one of the most funniest limitation from my point of view. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's have a look to the environment. So once more, keep in mind, this is a live demo. I've tested everything before, but we will see how it works. Okay, first of all, we get an overview about the service itself. Then we deploy a network configuration or have a look to the network configuration options. And at the end, we also validate, is the configuration in place or is something wrong? So let's go ahead. And you can see here I have now my Azure environment. This is my Azure environment. So I have here my resource group. This is my network manager resource group with all components inside from the networking perspective. We also have...
Really sorry to interrupt, but we cannot see your Azure portal.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So stop screening, present slides. Share screen. Window. Let's take it once more. So. Share. Okay. Share screen. So I hope you can see it now.
Yeah, we can see it now. Great.
Okay. So here you can see I have my resource group from the networking perspective. So here's also the network manager inside. So here's the service. And I have a second network resource group where I have installed VMs in different regions. So I have one region, East US 2 and West US 2. So when we go to the VM in East US 2, so I'm connected now over Azure Bastion host, and you can see I have no connection between West US and East US. So the IP address 10.2.0.4 is the VM in West US. So you can see it here. This is the private IP address in West US, and I'm connected to the East US 2 VM. Okay, so when we go to the network manager service, you have here the network manager service, and you can see here, this is the main, the overview from the service itself. On the right side, you have on the deployment process, the option to define the subscription scope or the scope level inside the tenant. In this case, I've selected only one subscription. And what I've mentioned before, you can change the scope every time. So in this case, I have only my MVP subscription selected, but I can also add a second one if I want. And then I have also the virtual networks from this subscription as well. Here you have the option to define a cross-tenant level connection, so to another tenant if you want. So in my case, I only have my tenant and nothing else. So we have here activity log, we have here access control EM rights. So if you want, you can choose custom role-based access controls if the service is GA. So we have separate permissions here as well. Then we have here the first thing what you have to do, network groups. In this case, I have defined two network groups, two different network groups. The first one is a manual. So you can see here, I've assigned here two virtual networks, the virtual network from East US 2 and from West US. This is a source. This is a manual add virtual network to this network group. When we go back to the second one, this is an automatical group. So in this case, I have here defined a policy, and the policy says, okay, if there is a tag available on a virtual network, which the name is network enabled, then you should add, then the network should be added to this group membership here. So we can see here, I only have here the East US 2 virtual network, and I want to add the second network as well. So I go to the West US virtual network and add a second tag or add a new tag. Network manager enabled. Fine here. One, the value is not important here. Click on apply, and it will take up to 15 minutes, and I will see the new network here in the second network group. So it will take some time. Okay, then we have the network group in place. Then we go ahead and configure our configuration. So in this case, I've configured a mesh configuration, and I've assigned this configuration to a group, in this case, network group. And you can see here the network group, full mesh, the manually group. In this case, I have my two virtual networks inside. So when you want, you can create a new configuration, and you have here the ability to change, to select the topology. Go to topology, here you have the mesh functionality or the hub and spoke functionality if you want. And when we are in place, we go ahead and define the deployment. And you have here different options to deploy, or different ways to deploy the configuration. I will show you the first option what you have. So select the configuration, click here on deploy process, select the target region. In this case, I have two regions in place, so West US and East US 2. And I'm going to select West US 2 and East US. So these two locations are the locations where my VMs are available. Click on next. You can see here I've added now a new configuration to each location, and click on deploy. So the process itself will take a few seconds. And when it's finished, we will get an update and deployment is completed. Meantime, let's have a look to the VM itself. So the ping, the SMP, is not possible at the moment. The deployment is now submitted, and it will take some time. And then the deployment should be succeeded. Voila, the configuration is now in place. It takes a few seconds, and when we add another region or another location, it's also in place. Okay, so this is really, really simple. When we have a look to the virtual network itself, so go back here to the virtual network. And I've mentioned before, we're creating in the backend a VNet peering. So normally you should see here on the virtual network perspective under peerings, a peering, but it's not available because it's not 100% the same when you create here a virtual network peering, because we don't need the synchronize option here. Where you can see the configuration itself. You have here a new topic, in this case, Network Manager. And here you can see the configuration, connectivity configuration, security, admin configuration, we will cover a little bit later. Here you can see the mesh configuration, the topology is a mesh, and the scope, the connectivity scope is regional. This is really, really important to understand. So we have here the connectivity inside the Network Manager section here. Okay, so I will stop my sharing, switch back to my presentation, share screen, and let's go ahead and talk about the second option what you have. It's also really, really interesting, and it's from my point of view also really important. Manage network rules. So when we think about the network configuration, you have your virtual network, you have your peering between your virtual network, and normally you have a firewall, or you have maybe network security groups in place, and you also assign the network security group to the subnet, to a different subnet in each region. So what can we do with the managed networking rules from the managed networking rules perspective? So let's talk about what's the difference between security admin rules versus network security groups. Here you can see the differences, and the most common differences are the highlighted one. So network security groups are normally assigned to a subnet or to a network interface, what you prefer. A security admin rule is always assigned to a virtual network. So the benefit here is really, really simple. When you create a new subnet, the network security, the security admin rule is always assigned to each subnet inside the virtual network. From the priority perspective, it's higher than network security groups. We will see this in a few seconds. And from the action type, we have not only two actions. Network security groups have only two actions, allow and deny. And from the security admin rule perspective, we have three actions. We have allow, deny, and always deny. Always allow, I'm sorry. So what does this mean? We'll cover this picture here. So normally you have the traffic. The traffic goes to comes to the security admin rule, and the security admin rule will check, okay, is this rule valid, or is there any policy in place? And you have here three options: the allow option, and the allow option means, okay, it's allowed or it's not available, there's nothing available in the security admin rule. It will bypass the security admin rule and always ask the network security rule or the network security group, is it allowed to connect to VM, or is it allowed to connect to service XYZ? The second option what you have is the always allow. So you can find a network security rule, and this network security rule you deny, for example, port 80. And when you assign a security admin rule with allow port 80, it's all with the option always allow, you will have the ability to connect over port 80 to the VM. And the third option what you have is the deny rule. So when you define here a security admin rule with a deny rule, it is always denied, so it doesn't cover the configuration from a network security group. So what are the benefits here? The benefits here is the operational benefits. So when we think about network security groups, it's really, really hard to configure. In this case, you can define your teams. You can say, okay, hey, you have here your environment, you have here your network security groups. You can maintain or you can configure this network security groups if you want. But I will place the company rules in security admin rules. So the company rule could be there's no port 3389 available over the internet, or there is no port 22 available over the internet. This is a company rule and is for all VMs the same. Administrators don't need to manage all network security groups because you can give this to the departments itself, and it minimizes the operational overhead for sure. From the emergency benefit, so when you know, okay, there is a really, really critical port or high risky traffic available, you can centralized remove this port over all environments if you want. And this is really, really important and really quickly. And from the protection benefit, when a resource are provisioned, the security admin rules will always assigned to each resources, because the security admin rules always assigned to a virtual network. And when we create, for example, a new VM in a new subnet where no network security group is assigned, the security admin rules will always assigned to this to these VMs. And you also have the ability to enforce critical security rules to all your environments. So that's from the live from the theory section. I will switch back to my demo environment and will show you the functionality and much more. So okay, so we are now back. The configuration here is fine. Everything is good. Now let's go ahead and let's have a look to the configuration or to the second VM. So we have here in WestUS2 a second VM, and in this VM we have a public IP address assigned. And no, this is not really the most common way, but from the demo perspective, it's okay. So I have here a public IP address assigned, and there is also a web server installed. And you can see here I have my public DNS name, and I have no access at the moment to the public website. So what I want to do is go back to the configuration space. So I have here my configuration. So let's have a look to the second network security group. Is it available, the second one? Oh, it will take some time. Okay, so we have here a security configuration. So we have here the choice to create a connectivity or a security configuration. In my case, I've selected here security configuration. And if you worked with Azure Firewall in the past, you can see here I have my rule collection and my rules itself. So I'm creating here my rule collection, and inside my rule collections, I have my different rules. So in this case, sorry, this is the wrong one. So I want to use this one here. So I have here two rule collections. One rule collection is the main rule for infrastructure service. In this case, I have a port 80, priority 1. So keep in mind, or let's think about network security group when the priority is starting for network security group 100. This is also a big difference here. So we can start here with priority 1. Then we have the direction inbound, outbound. We can edit here the configuration if you want. So we have here the priority, we have here the action, in this case always allow, deny or allow. Allow means the network security group will also be checked. Deny means it's blocked, and always allow means, okay, when it's allowed in the network security rule, it will be allowed. So then we have here the protocol. We have here different protocols what you can use. In my case, TCP. The source type here is any, or you can also define here a service tag if you want, for example, from the internet. Then the source port, and the destination the same, in this case, port 80. Okay, so I have here now my configuration. I have also a second configuration here in place with RDP from a specified public IP address. This is only for demo reasons. Okay, so now let's go ahead and deploy the configuration. I will show you now the second option what you have for the deployment process. Go here to the in the section deployments, click on deploy configuration. And now you have the ability to select, okay, what configuration type do you want to deploy? In this case, I want to deploy a security admin rule in your goal state. In this case, as my main configuration, and I select only best US2. That's there is my VM with the web server. Click on next, click on deploy. Same process, will take a few seconds. So meanwhile, I will go back to my configuration. So you can see here the deployment process is succeeded. It will take some time. So come on. Okay. Meantime, when we go back to the network configuration, so you can see here in the West US2 virtual network, I have here my network manager. And here you can see the connectivity topology and also the security admin configuration. So you can see here now the configuration for this virtual network. You can see it here, what is allowed, what is not allowed. And where you also see the configuration, this is really important. When we go back to the VM, so we are here now in the VM section. When we go here to the networking perspective, and here you have a new ability. You see here, check for additional rules. So this is the network security group configuration. And yeah, it will take some time. And normally you should also see here the additional rules from the network manager. But let's go ahead and reload here the configuration. As is a live demo. Once more. Come on. Hopefully it's working. Okay. Give it some second. Meanwhile, let's talk about the when we want to remove the configuration. This is a little bit strange in my point of view. So when we want to remove the configuration, we are going to the network manager, and let's disconnect the two virtual networks. So you can see here I have my ICMP ping in place. And I want to remove a deployment. So you can select here your configuration, for example, the mesh configuration. I'm sorry. Click here on the connectivity, remove deployment. And normally it should select here the configuration. It's not available. This case, I want to remove the connectivity, and you have to select none here. Remove existing configuration, and select here the targets, US, West US2, East US2. Click on next. And here you can see now the remove. Click on deploy, and it will take some time. Okay, voila, we have now the ability to connect to the web server. When we go back to the VM, hopefully we should see here now additional ports, additional rules. Come on. Yes, here we are. And you can see here, this is from the priority 0 and 1. So this is always higher than priority from a network security group. And from the connectivity perspective, now the connectivity is broken between those two regions. Okay, at the end, what Microsoft will do is a new functionality. It's not available right now, but when we create here, when we create here a new network group, we can define in the future here the member type. Normally, the member type is a virtual network, and in the future, you also have the ability to connect a subnet. So you can select in the future single subnets and connect only those subnets together. So it's really, really interesting. I don't know how does it work, but you will see it when we go to the configuration here. We have here the ability, I'm sorry, not here. The group member. Where is it? Oh no, this is not here. I'm sorry. Okay, yeah. Yeah, and now you can see also here we have now the second virtual network as well. Okay, so we are good in time. Are there some questions? So I'm now finished with my presentation.
Woohoo! Catch some breath, Hannes. You were non-stop. You did not stop for a minute. Like, you were hopping from slides to demos to slides, and back again to the demos. I think it was great. You talked about. I was here all through time. You talked about customer challenges. You defined about scope, network groups, topologies. There was some great theory that you built up. Then you went on the demos, and you also came back and talked about managed network rules. And I see we have people really like this session. David says, "Man, this this content is gold."
That's great. Thank you.
Sham says this session is going very well. We also have some questions. So let's take some questions, right? So Sham is saying, "Great session, Hannes. How does Azure support automation and orchestration of network management tasks? And what tools are available to help organizations streamline these processes?" Is this related to networking? It's not my expertise.
Network management tasks. That's a good question.
It goes over my head, to be honest.
Okay, the network manager. Okay, so if you want to automatically configure the network manager, so I think it's not available at the moment, but in the future, you also have the same ability. So you can use ARM templates to deploy or Azure Bicep to deploy the network manager, and also Azure Bicep to configure the network manager. And if you want, you also can use PowerShell scripts to add a new network group and as well. So it's possible in the future, but at the moment it's only a preview feature. So I don't know what, or I don't have the ability to automatically configure anything here.
Oh yeah, I really like that you mentioned about the biceps. I what we really do is, I always mess up with with creating resource groups and managing it. So it helps me to have a version control, right? I can always roll back. If I have
Yeah.
to create 5 VMs, I would just create a for loop inside it. The way we would do it, right? So I really like doing it with the biceps. Then we have another question coming up from David. He says, I have a question. How can organization measure the success of their central network management efforts in Azure? What matrices should they track to ensure ongoing optimization and improvement? It just means that, I mean, how can they actually measure it, right, once they start using it? Um, because it's at the end it's all ROI, right? If you go ahead and suggest to your manager that, hey, I want to use this tool, and they're like, all right, but why would you like to use it anyway?
So management effort in Asia. Yeah, from my point of view, you have here centralized network management. So it's really important. So if you have a centralized firewall, or if you're using a virtual WAN, so it's a game changer. So when you use a normal VNet peering, so from my point of view, it's really it's an addition to the existing configuration, to existing management. It's really important. From the pricing perspective, it's not so. Yeah, okay.
Let's not go there. Let's not go there.
Yeah, but it's in preview, and I hope it's there's a change here from the pricing perspective. But
Yeah.
when you have a traditional hub and spoke environment with your network security groups, I think this is the best additional tool what you can use.
Yeah, that's good. I hope, David, thanks for the question. I hope this helps. That Sham has some clappings. Woohoo! We should also clap. Mega is saying, I would like to rewatch this session. It's really nice. You can, wherever you're watching Mega, we're streaming on LinkedIn, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and C Sharp TV and C Sharp website. You can always come back and watch on the same links. No problem at all. Then Bob says, can you suggest any certification on working in Azure? Well-paced session, by the way.
Certification on networking. So do you mean certification now, Asia certification?
I believe that's
Yeah.
that's what Bob wanna ask. Yeah, there are many certifications around Azure, right?
So I've achieved 2 certification. I guess the one is the EC 700, and this is a really good certification from the network perspective. And there's a second one available. This is the connectivity troubleshooting session. What kind of EC it is, I don't know at the moment.
So you can,
So there
I
are
think,
two.
yeah.
There are 2 really good sessions available, certifications available.
Yeah. And I think Bob, if you just Google Azure certification, it will take you to docs.microsoft.learn or somewhere. So they keep on changing URL, right? Its best thing is to Google or Bing or maybe Chat GPT, whatever you want to do these days. I
GPT.
think we need to bring in the third option now, right? Right. You'll get over there. So, Ivan says room session. I don't know what that means, but you have cast. It should be good. We'll take a couple of more questions and we'll just wrap it up. I know that we've taken a long. Ivan asked, what advice do you have for organizations that are just getting started with central network management in Azure? What are some key considerations they should keep in mind as they begin their journey? I believe you did touch on this in the beginning.
So from the journey perspective, when we implement network structures in Asia, so the normal way is here to deploy a hub and spoke technology. So we always start with a hub and spoke technology, and then we have to think about, okay, what's the connectivity between on-premise and Asia? Would you like to use a hub and spoke with a VNet, VPN gateway connectivity? Or do you prefer another way, like a virtual WAN? So this is not the hub and spoke itself. So you have a separate configuration here, a separate management here from virtual WAN. So it depends. But have a look at the enterprise scale framework. So I think there you can find everything what you need from the network perspective journey.
Perfect. Thanks again, Ivan, for your question. And then we have Ricardo asking us, do you have a course book? Do you have a course? I think that's course means, or book of central network management in Azure?
Not at the moment.
Yeah, I said I could get it because you said it's in preview, right? So it's pretty early.
Yes.
Yeah, but I can bet some of the MVPs or folks at Microsoft they'll release it. If you're active on Twitter and you follow Hannes,
Yes.
Lagler, that's his Twitter. Probably you'll find him tweeting about any books or latest updates that Microsoft brings in. So there were some great sessions. It's 12. It's midnight here, right? We don't get a lot of questions at this time of the live show, but looks like people really loved your session, Hannes. So well, it's about we wrap up the show. Any final thing you want to add before we wrap it up?
So from my side, so if
Mhm.
you have questions, if you have additional questions, maybe to other topics as well, so
Mhm.
you can find me on Twitter, you can find me on LinkedIn, or you can also visit my blog or my YouTube channel. So feel free. On YouTube, you also have the ability to see virtual one in action. So I have here many sessions if
Yeah,
you want.
that's it. I have put up your
Yes.
blog right here. What does dot
Mhm.
80 means? I've never. This is the first time I'm looking at. What does
Austria.
dot?
Austria.
Oh, I'm so dumb. That's an interesting one.
Dot,
You guys have got an interesting one.
dot com was reserved. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's pretty cool. Dot at. All right, and it was lovely hosting you after so long. We're bringing back Cloud Summit once again, probably towards the end of this year once again. I would love to host you there. And thank you
Yeah.
so much for time and thank you so much for accepting the invitation. Hope to see you soon. And yeah, take good care of yourself and have a
Okay.
nice week ahead. Bye
Goodbye.
bye. Bye bye.
Have a nice day.
You too.